Hey, hello, howdy. How you doing? So, I've been saying this for a while, but since we've hit day 500 and are at that halfway point, I've added some mods to the game to keep it fresh. Don't lose your mind yet, they're mostly quality of life adjustments that have all been recommended by you guys, going back as far as part 1. The mods I added are authentic animations, playable guitar, extra map symbols and map symbol size slider, fuel side indicator, scrap weapons and scrap guns since we're over that 500 day mark and I think it'd be fun to craft some wacky things to mess around with. Playable arcade machines because I thought that'd be funny. And then my favorites. The AutoTsar collection, including Ford Mustangs, Jeep Wranglers, motorcycles, and trailers. But yeah, just wanted to drop that in before we get into the video so no one's super caught off guard or anything like that. While we're in the intro, I do have some plugs, so bear with me. I have a Discord that you can join and hang out with the 1100 or so people in there. I also have a PZ server that I host and has had a queue in it most days since we've added it, actually for this PvP wipe. That's interesting to you, again, you can join that through the Discord since all of the information is already in there. Lastly, I have a Patreon and YouTube memberships now, so if you like what I do and want to support the channel and the PZ server, that's the best way to do so. Anyway, let's get into part 6. Today was my first day on the journey to my next destination. Surprisingly, I didn't completely destroy my truck today, and managed to pass the ambulance that I left behind in the beginning of part 5. I also figured this would be a good time to show you what you missed at the beginning of part 5, so here's the spiffos I stayed at and stole a car from, and here's the little room I slept in. Arrived at Twiggy's that night, and got to work clearing out the immediate area. Twiggy's would be my interim base while I got established in West Point. As I cleared out wave after wave, I decided that the second floor would probably serve as a nice escape from the bodies. Only one problem. After loading up my car, remembering to grab nails, saws, guns, katanas, all that, I forgot a hammer. My second day in West Point was a huge change of pace from the last 100 days. Zombies were everywhere, so I got to work establishing a small foothold around Twiggy's. Pushed into the city for a few hours before losing both melee weapons and running back to the bathroom to rearm. On day 503, I found something that makes me so incredibly happy. Because I've never been to West Point, a lot of the assets hadn't spawned in yet, and I was able to find a Mustang. Surprisingly, not in terrible shape. And also, while checking the area, I was able to find DIY Volume 1 in the garbage can. Really starting off Part 6 on a good note here. After getting myself into a sticky situation, I decided to dip out through a shattered window, giving myself a deep wound in my right arm. Since that basically destroys any ability to use melee weapons effectively, decided to head back to my base and spent the rest of the day just playing pinball. Also completely unrelated, but does anyone remember the old pinball game on like Windows XP and like Windows 7 PCs? Like, I used to play that all the time as a kid. 504, I began my expedition to the school, on foot. As of right now, I only had one car, well, two if you count the Mustang, I guess, but I really didn't want to risk trashing either of them considering I didn't even know what West Point would look like after being abandoned for 1.5 years. At around 1 p.m., I found an even cleaner looking Mustang parked at someone's house. After checking it out, all I needed was a charged battery and I'd be good to go, but it'd have to be a different project for another time. After making it to the school, I decided to scout out the surrounding area. Road here wasn't terrible, a couple hordes roaming around, but I could burn through those pretty easily. Turns out this isn't your everyday school, and hosting furries seems to be right up West Point's alley. After leaving the furry convention, I decided to check out the school, and figured that I'd probably be best to turn the gym into the main section of the base for now. Got enough escapes that I would never be in any real danger. Also got some nice mini storage rooms already built in, and I could add some doors out the back of each locker room for more escape routes. While searching upstairs, I found a car butchering in a nutshell and backyard smelting for dumb shits, so again, really crushing at these early days. On day 505, I packed up my gear and the generator and drove back out to the school. Once I got there, I cleared out the zombies in the immediate area before spending most of the day just unloading my truck into the small storage room in the gym, throwing some of the more useful gear just all over the gym. In the afternoon, I went through each room of the school and cleared out any stragglers for my own sanity. No sense in risking losing the run right now for being lazy. The morning of 506 was spent going through each room of the school and collecting anything that might be of value. Here's the collection I was able to obtain. The rest of the day was spent planning on how I wanted to fortify the school. It's too big to run with just one generator, so I'd have to work with size constraints, but as long as I could do that, it'd be a pretty kick-ass base when it was all completed. For the morning of day 507, I'd cut down trees to gather planks for farming. Still needed a hammer, but this was a chore that needed to get done eventually, so I figured why not knock it out now. After that, I spent the rest of the day reading through all the magazines that I'd found in the school so far to catch up on all those new recipes and dances I hadn't learned. 5:08, I went to the houses next to school and looted a few of them until I found a hammer. But before I got to any of the looting, I had some friends to take care of. I ended up tripping a house alarm and decided to just hang around to get some action in until I became exerted, in which case I just drove around a little to lose the horde before dipping back to base. I was able to head back out and scoop up the battery for the Mustang, but came back to the door of the gym missing, which means safety is going to be an issue for a little bit. .509 was a day entirely spent putting up framing for a bunch of the walls on the first floor. Wanted to do metal walls, but I forgot a welder's mask, so I need to find another before I could secure the base. A couple of you told me this in the comments from part 5 that I could use wooden framing but do metal walls, so I wanted to try that out because that would save me a ton of resources going forward if this was the case. Spent 510 hitting up both auto shops looking for a welder mask. Not sure why exactly I felt compelled to go there, but I just figured for some reason that a welder's mask would be hanging out in one of those buildings. With my luck, I managed to find basically everything but what I was looking for. At each stop, groups of zombies had decided they felt like defending the area. Call them blue collar for loving the mechanic shop more than the southern people love the Bible, but I had to put an end to it pretty quickly. After clearing out both stores, I decided to head back to base and continue my search tomorrow. 5:11, I walked outside to see it snowing. Moving out to the storage units on the outskirts of town, I found a larger horde hanging out around the area. After spending most of the morning fighting through zombies, I managed to lose them and get inside, where I found some hippies.
Oh yeah, boy. Here, take a look at this, man. See that? Hippies.
After dealing with them, I spent some time looting the storage area in the large warehouse next door, with basically the same results as yesterday. Really cool items, but no welder mask. On the way back, I tried to get into the hardware store, but there were too many zombies in the area, so I burned through some of my ammo and decided it really wasn't worth it at this point, and I'd come back tomorrow. Day 512 was meant to be a looting day, until I tripped another house alarm when I climbed through a window. There go my plans for the day. Cue the montage.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
When I got back to base that night, I decided it was probably time to ditch the furry costume in favor of something a little more, my style. Decided it was time to bring out some more firepower. In 513, I switched over to the Model 870 that I'd snagged off a zombie cop, grabbed the Glock 17 that I'd found on a dead body, a few boxes of ammo, and set out for the hardware store. After dealing with some friends hanging out outside my base, of course. At 7:20, I had what has to have been the luckiest moment I've ever had in PZ. There's no other way to describe this other than sheer luck, so I'll just let it play out for you. When I tell you I almost shit myself. After clearing out the horde surrounding the hardware store, I looted it for everything that held any value, which unfortunately did not include a welder mask. Not really sure where else I could look for one, so I decided to just start going house to house and hoping to find one in a garage somewhere. By 14, I picked up where I left off on more door-to-door work in search of a welder's mask. Most of the day was pretty monotonous, just bouncing from garage to garage until finally finding one in the garage shelf. 515 was entirely spent moving items out of lockers and disassembling all of the lockers in the area to gather materials in order to fortify the base a little bit more. 516, I finally got to work building the metal fencing to better secure the school. It meant cutting off entire wings, but it was a necessity. Let's be real here. It's not like I'm running out of space or anything. 517 was basically the same as the previous days. I would go through and disassemble lockers to gather metal sheets to help secure the school. Nothing too crazy, so we can keep it moving. I leveled up metalworking the next morning, which is important to note because that means I can finally make some dope-ass gates to make the base look a little bit cooler. After that happened, I decided to head on down to Enigma Books to find the final metalworking book. Naturally, I found things like the tuning magazines for Mustangs and Jeeps, a new dance, and not Metalworking 5. When I got back to the base, I spent the rest of the day reading through the magazines I'd borrowed from the bookstore. On 519, I closed off the cafeteria and set framing to block off the back staircase. This would close off an entry point, but still keep the back stairs available if zombies flooded in for some reason. After that was taken care of, I moved the water catchers to the second floor and moved some lockers into the lounge upstairs, which would serve as a weapons storage room eventually. Another pretty quiet day where a lot of base organization got done, but nothing really happened outside of that. In 520, I sorted out most of my weapons. My melee weapons would go in the lounge upstairs, while my firearms would take up the principal's office. Fitting. I'd still need some more materials to fully secure the base and start decorating, but for now, we were sitting pretty good. 521 was more of me sifting through piles of junk that were sitting in the gym. Finally stored all my guns and melee weapons, and even filled out the library a little bit more. After that, I decided I'd turn my bedroom and the room to the right into the kitchen. 522 was a nice break from the base. I went out and set up a generator at the gas station near the center of West Point, where I filled up the car and all of my empty gas cans. On the way back, I passed a third Mustang and stopped to check it out, determining that I liked this one a little bit better than my current. Drove back to base to gather some gear and headed back out to grab the new Mustang. After fighting through the zombies in the area, I was finally able to start my new car and tow the red Mustang back to base with me, effectively grabbing another car. Also, if you're asking where my truck went, don't talk about it. In 523, I destroyed the wall between my bedroom and the room on the right to turn it into a kitchen. After building it out some, I decided to go on a small looting run to the house next door to look for any additional items to use. After getting back to the base, I decided to relocate my bedroom to the bathrooms on the second floor of the school. It was around this time that I noticed I was becoming depressed, which, I mean, checks out because I've been living in a fucking school surrounded by knowledge for like 3 weeks now, and that's gotta suck. 524 was spent cleaning up the base. I realized at some point that I'd leveled up my strength, so that was sweet. Gonna be the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the apocalypse if I keep this shit up. Anyway, yeah. Today I just cleared out zombie bodies, and by that I mean I just threw them in a pile outside. What time I had left, I disassembled all the shit in the bathrooms upstairs to make it feel more like a bedroom and less like an afternoon at the Washington football team's, Commanders, stadium. 525 had some of everything. Spent a ton of time in the gun room just setting up and decorating before heading out to look for some action. After finding a pretty decent sized horde, I spent a few hours just fighting through it until I became exhausted and had to ditch them. I'm going to show you guys one of my favorite moves to do in PZ. It's pretty dangerous, but as long as the setup is right, it can drop an entire horde off your radar relatively quickly. .526, I fully moved all the junk out of the gym and into their own respective rooms. I also moved anything mechanics related out into the open lot outside of the school, which would become my garage whenever I got around to it. Another day of just moving different piles of shit into other piles of shit. On 527, I had an I'm an idiot moment when I destroyed my boots falling over a fence and then gave myself a deep wound in each foot by walking over glass shards twice. So that was fun. .528, I destroyed the small fencing around back and built a metal gate for the entrance to my garage. After that, I went ahead and cut down some more trees to make the framing defense in the back as well. 529 was pretty boring. I added framing for the garage to seal that in, and then built out the kitchen a bit more. These last few weeks have been a nice break and a new challenge, but I think it's time for some more action. 530 was the looting run day. During the morning, I found a house that must have belonged to a retired military serviceman or a pissed off high school kid. Anyway, I ended up looting a lot of the armor there and brought back both beds to turn one of the rooms into school and do a little med bay. My second run later that day, I took the car out and found another generator, and some gear that could be useful for some pretty cool weapons if I could find a drill. When I got back to base that night, I noticed a zombie had broken through the door again, so that needed to be addressed. On day 531, I boarded up the front door and the subsequent windows in that area, and then ended up spending the rest of the day just fully securing the interior of the base. 532 was spent in the main section of the city on what was a pretty underwhelming looting run. I actually ended up spending most of the day just fighting zombies in the area and then looting them for leather strips to use for crafting and tailoring. On 533, I spent the morning adding some protection pieces to the Mustang. After that wrapped up, I went to the outskirts by the farm and went to town on some zombies in the area. To end the day, I decided to head into the workshop and built out a couple cool weapons to try the following days. On 534, I decided to catch up on reading. Even though I was still missing Metalworking Volume 5, I did have 2 of the books that I needed, so I spent the entire day reading Volume 3 for First Aid, and then spent the next 2 days reading Cooking Volume 5. When I wrapped up the last cooking book, I went back to my workshop and crafted a metal spear. I actually got to use one of these in one of our hosted community events, and they are deadly, so I had to give it a try in this series. 537, I wanted to do some window shopping for the base. By that, I mean I wanted to loot other people's homes for my base. Went through a couple houses early on in the day and found some nice furniture, but eventually I ended up just going to town on some zombies with my new weapons. I really like the stop sign. I just wish I was a little stronger so that I could swing it faster. I feel like it would only really do well in around smaller groups of zombies, and I'd probably die pretty quickly if I used this on a horde. The pipe with scissors, on the other hand, left a lot to be desired. I felt like I barely did any damage with it, but that might have also just been because I was completely exhausted from swinging a fucking stop sign around all day. One cool little tidbit here is that both the stop sign and the pipe with scissors counted towards my axe XP, so do with that information what you will. Day 538 was another combat heavy day. Like I said earlier, I've gotten to try the spear before, so I knew how deadly it could be, but I just wanted to showcase it on this series since a lot more people will watch this over a stream from like a month ago. So here's the scrap spear that looks like some medieval shit you'd see in Game of Thrones. On day 539, I went out and finished fencing in the garage section. This took way longer than I was hoping for, but it was nice to be fully fenced in now. The next day, I took 15 boxes of 9x19 rounds and gathered something like 500 cases of gunpowder. Now I have no idea what the fuck I'm gonna do with it, but I'm sure I'll figure something out with it. By the time that wrapped up, it was around 2 p.m., so I decided to build a staircase up to the second floor and roofed in the garage so I wouldn't have to work in sub-zero temperatures anymore. This actually took way longer than I thought it was going to. I was thinking maybe it'd take a full day and a half, or maybe even 2 days, but it ended up taking like 5 days. 542 was again spent working on the roof. Towards the end of the day, zombies broke through the front door and it took me way too long to kill 2 zombies with a hammer. I feel like I've had at least 2 or 3 other clips of this exact same scenario playing out, and I just love that it takes like 30 minutes of just smacking the shit out of a zombie. After completely securing the front door and walling it off from any other future threats, I spent the next few days working on finishing up the roof for the garage. On 546, a few zombies broke in through the library and took apart some of the walls to get to the garage area. I was able to clear them out pretty quickly, but had to waste more material rebuilding the wall. I wrapped up the roof on day 547 and immediately noticed that zombies had broken down the gate I built at the entrance. Adding insult to injury, I'm also out of propane, so I either need to find a propane tank or another propane torch if I want another metal pole gate. 548 was a looting run for a propane tank. Who'd have guessed? I actually found a half full one pretty early on, but I'm greedy and that's not enough for me, so I spent the entire day bouncing around from garage to garage looking for anything else and actually ended up leveling my spear skill. So there's that. Nothing really exciting happened after that. Found a cordless drill, which is good for scrap weapons, but Other than that, I didn't find anything useful, aside from more crafting materials. On 549, I organized my pile of shit from yesterday into its designated areas, and then spent some time crafting another metal spear. After that, I went out and got to work clearing out the area from some zombies that had wandered. My favorite things about West Point over Riverside is that you're never really safe. Even when you clear out an area, another small horde is going to come wandering in, and it just keeps the combat flowing. At 550, I went out to loot the police station and found a shit ton of ammo and some really cool guns. After killing a few zombies in the area, I decided to head back to base to drop everything off, when I tried to pull a sick-ass drift and slammed into a streetlight, totaling the Mustang. F's in the chat for that endeavor, but luckily, I walked away from it with no injuries. Starting off day 551, I headed back to the police station to pick up the police cruiser, only to realize I never brought a screwdriver, a battery, or a gas can to actually leave with the car. So I walked all the way back to base and grabbed said materials before heading out a second time. Really didn't think this would be an all-day affair, but here we are. Decided that I wanted to build off 551 and spend today working on the police cruiser. I had 3 Mustangs in my vicinity, 2 of which were in the garage. The process was pretty simple. I'd take the best parts of the other 2 cars and put them on the police cruiser just like I did with the car in Riverside last episode. But unlike Riverside, I was going to try and take care of this car this time. 553 was more working on the police cruiser. I added the chain to the wheel for protection, installed a better battery, and all I needed was a repaired engine, which I took care of by taking engine parts from the other 2 cars in the area. Really going forward, I just have to grab some whenever I passed another car. What time I had left in the day, I organized my gun room and decorated the kitchen some more to give it a more survivalist feel. Day 554 was pretty combat heavy. I went out to the houses above the school and started working my way through each of them, clearing out a lot of the zombies in the area. Goal at this point is to secure a wide perimeter around the school so that I can really get to skill grinding in part 7. And I know that seems far away, but these days fly by. By 55 was much the same. The only real difference with today was that I grabbed a propane torch and just started disassembling everything I came across to gather more metal sheets so that I could throw some armor on the police cruiser. Other than that, it was more looting and killing the occasional 1 or 2 zombies that I'd stumble into. Spent 556 working on thinning out the zombies above me and leveled my axe skill, which I decided I was just going to grind for a while since I keep flipping between combat skills and it's driving me nuts. Day 557, I decided to go find engine parts for my car. Nothing really interesting happened today aside from tripping a house alarm at around 6 in the morning. At least it wasn't snowing though, right? It's gonna be a rough 2 to 3 months in the winter, but at least it's not like in Louisville where I was living like I was on a skid row or some shit. .558 was pretty quiet. Spent a lot of the day building more protection for the police cruiser, shocker, and after that, just organized the base a little bit more and removed some extra sections that I didn't like looking at. Mainly the stall doors in my bedroom and other shit like that. 559, I decided to check out the area to my immediate left. Worst part of my situation is that I'm fat as shit again, and get exhausted if I have to swing an axe more than 3 times an hour. So it basically became, how many zombies can I kill before I have to dive back into a car and drive around for 2 hours, rinse and repeat. In the afternoon, while looting some of the buildings I'd cleared around, I found an unread dance and finally found Metalworking 5. Favorite thing about this is it probably means nothing to you guys, but this was seriously the highlight of the episode for me. Anyway, I spent the next 2 days reading Volume 5. In between reading sessions, I walked down to the kitchen and found that a zombie broke through the back door, so that was going to need to be fixed at some point. After wrapping up reading on the second day, I went down and spent the day refortifying the garage entrance. Rebuilt a metal pole gate, added the door back to the back entrance, and fixed the wall the zombie had busted through like the goddamn Kool-Aid Man.
Oh yeah!
Day 562 was another combat heavy day. Drove around some of the neighborhood areas with the siren on to pull over some pockets of zombies, and generally just spent the day working through anything that came over to me. This was actually a really enjoyable day for me. I always love these kind of combat days where the goal is to just fight. No tight area to fight in or get stuck in, just a road, an escape plan with a running car behind me, and any zombie that I wanted to take a swing at. I spent the morning of 563 working on my electrical skill by disassembling all the shit I'd accumulated so far. After all of that, and crafting a bunch of ham radios and disassembling them, I still didn't even get a level out of it. So, I spent the rest of the day messing around with scrap weapons, working on crafting a gun and a bunch of ammo to test out. I woke up on 564 with a nasty cold. Glad to see we've come full circle from the LV. Decided to move my bed into the kitchen where the antique stove was located and would stay there temporarily until my cold went away, which luckily I was able to remove the sickness relatively quickly in one day. Decided to keep my bed down here at least for the next month or two to keep myself from freezing, catching another cold while I slept. Stockpiled the oven with close to 70 hours of fuel and could always add more pretty easily by cutting down trees in the surrounding area. In 565, I decided to head out to the edge of West Point, the 3 houses by the lake, which has become an incredibly popular destination for players to make their bases in both single player and multiplayer. Goal with this was to spend my time up here over the next few days, disassembling the gated fences to reach metalworking level 10. 567, I hit metalworking 9, and on 568, I finished the fencing in the area, and was stupid enough to try to disassemble the fencing around some houses by the docks. Blared the car horn and took care of any zombies in the area before realizing I couldn't disassemble any of the fencing. But at least I got some kills out of this though. I also found a trailer on the way back, so I scooped that up as well before making my way back to the school. On 570, Merry Christmas, I decided to head on back to Twiggy's. Not to hang out there like some poor divorced stepdad, but actually to loot the gun store, like some poor divorced stepdad. I figured this would be a good excuse to grind out some maintenance, so I grabbed a metal bar and got to work beating down the door, which took almost the entire day, only for me to be greeted with the metal gates that can't be broken down from this end. I need to break the gates around the windows if I wanted to get in. Or so I thought. And after spending the night in the car, I woke up and got to work, only to realize I wasn't making any progress. So I decided to head on back to base. When I was passing the city center, I noticed a metal fence section that I could disassemble, so following the same method as before, I blasted the horn and shouted to pull in all nearby zombies, and after they were taken care of, I got to work. After a few hours, I went to check the neighboring building, only to find it full of metal chairs that I could easily disassemble. As I was speeding through it, I got hit with one of the biggest jump scares I've ever gotten in this game. A humble reminder to not go max speed when in the middle of a fucking city. After getting back to my base that night, I realized that I had left the stove on for the last 2 days and had almost no fuel left in it. Whoops. Spent all of 572 working on stocking the stove full of logs. Basically, what I would do was cut down a shit ton of trees, then grab the trailer and load it up. Once the trailer was full, I'd take all the logs back to base and add them to the antique oven as fuel. On 573, I set back out to go finish my metalworking skill, and only after clearing out more zombies did I realize that I forgot my propane torch back at base. After retrieving the torch, I got to work. Fortunately, by the time I wrapped up the chairs, I was still about 2000 XP short of level 10, and to make matters worse, the fucking blizzard outside. Lovely. Obviously, it's damn near impossible to see in these conditions, though the drive back was based almost entirely off of muscle memory and the fact that there were no trees in front of me. It was still an absolute shit show of a blizzard outside on 574. So I decided to do some menial tasks around the base, starting with beating the dog shit out of the doors with a metal bar to work on maintenance some more. Also filled up all my water bottles and set them out around the kitchen. On 575, the snow had finally stopped, at least for now. But it was a nice tropical 17 degrees outside, so I didn't want to risk leaving early anymore. After waiting in the base for a few hours while it warmed up, I headed back out to work on more metalworking. Finally maxed it out at around 6 PM that day. Check another one off the list. 576, I decided I was going to round out my next long blade level since it was the closest. That being said, close is a subjective term here. You're about to watch every major combat situation I was in throughout the day that took for me to get to 100 XP into my long blade. Now that that was settled and taken care of, I could focus on other things, like patching a hole in the base that some zombies made. Decided I was going to start airlocking my base since there seemed to be a trend of zombies breaking in at this point. Spent the entire day, and the next several days, building out various airlocks and passageways around the school. On 580 and 581, I did a ton of prep work for my next mini project. Nothing to really show besides a lot of driving and moving materials around, so we'll just keep it moving. 582, I put in a ton of work at the town hall, removing both sets of stairs, building escape ladders in the second floor. I also began destroying most of the flooring on the second floor with the goal of having one main lane. A lot of you can see where I'm going with this. On 583, I finished my build and got to gathering a pretty substantial horde. Probably could have put in some more effort into building out the second floor and removing more junk, but fuck it, this is what we're going with. I didn't want to risk anything yet because it was already late afternoon, and I didn't have a generator or flashlights or anything there, and a fall would kill me, so I decided to head back for the day. I spent the morning of 584 gathering a massive horde before leading them into the first floor of the town hall. And climbing up to the second floor before spending the next several hours walking back and forth to boost sneaking and light-footed. This was basically a more ghetto version of the setup I had in Riverside last episode. I slept on the second floor using a chair in one of the offices I had access to, and basically just spent days 585 and 586 click walking and holding shift to crouch sneak back and forth across the second floor. On 586, I finally leveled up my light-footed and sneaking. Once. Each. This sucks. After getting down, I made a quick look around to see that the entire horde had basically spread itself out into the city. I was able to make it back to base, where I decided to just reset my sleep cycle to get back on track for the next day. Next on my list was my electrical skill. I needed a break from the failed shit show, and this was really the escape I needed. Of course, I didn't have enough junk at my base to level up, so I went with the tried and true method of going door to door and disassembling all the TVs and then having watches of dead zombies and finally leveling up at around 2 p.m. Alright, it's time to get the car back. I grabbed my 3 best axes and made my way into the city center, where I started working my way through pockets of zombies. After the entire day, I finally made it back to my police car and headed back to base. Before drifting into a tree and trashing the end. Every time. I spent the entirety of 589 running around to every car I could find and taking all the engine parts. By the end of the day, I'd gotten around 90 engine parts to completely fix the police car. And on day 590, I went out and fixed the windshield and the hood. Oh, and I also found a better trailer with double the space as my first one. My goal over these last 10 days or so was to wrap up any skills that were close to being leveled up, which basically meant fishing and reloading. I know, such joyous and content-heavy skills. Now, being the dumbass that I am, I'd left the sledgehammer on the second floor of the town hall, and the zombies had destroyed my sheet rope to get me up there. Luckily, there were enough planks and debris scattered that I could build up some stairs. Only one problem. I didn't have a hammer or nails in. So I decided to hit up the hardware store to see if I'd missed anything, the initial looting. And after finding nothing of use, I decided to head back down to the warehouses. Needless to say, I was expecting a lot of zombies in the area since I pulled a bunch of them from the outskirts over here. Figured a lot would end up getting caught up in the area. Luckily, I was able to find a hammer after moving on from the self-storage area and into the larger warehouse. After looting the rest of the warehouse, I walked out the front door directly into 2 small hordes. Tried to dump as much shit into the trailer as I could before having to dip out. I lost them in the self-storage, was able to circle back to the trailer, drop off my gear, and turn back to take on the hordes. By around 4:30, I was exhausted and still hadn't even built a set of stairs to reach the sledgehammer. Decided to cut my losses on the day and head back to base. Zombies weren't going anywhere. Well, I mean, technically they are, but fuck off. But I had a hammer now. Planks were there. I could scoop up nails and head back out tomorrow to get my shit. After grabbing the sledgehammer the next morning, I made my way to the gun store. I'm sure there's been a ton of you screaming at the video asking why I haven't gone here yet. But hey, better late than never, right? Anyways, I went through looting in a couple stages. First sweep through, I grabbed any boxes of ammo and mags that I could use, as well as any guns that looked cool to me or that I haven't tried before. Some hidden gems here were things like an M32 grenade launcher. We're gonna have some fun with that. An AK-12, an AK-74N, and an M1 Garand, which I was super excited to try out. If you don't know, just like any other white American male, I'm a huge fan of World War II history. The second phase of looting consisted of me hitting up the back room and grabbing any clothing that would be of use or that looked cool. Things like chest rigs, night vision goggles, helmet visors, gas masks, really anything that would get me back up to that 100% protection on my gear. Last sweep through consisted of grabbing every mag from all of the guns I was leaving behind. Found an American 180 LMG with a 100 round mag, which sounds badass, right? Until you realize it holds 22 LR rounds, and you deal more damage from a griddle pan than you would with 10 bullets from this thing. So I decided to take the drum mag and some ammo, but leave the gun since it literally serves no purpose to me. Spent the rest of the day back at base just moving shit from my trailer into the gun room. 593 was pretty quiet. Spent the morning working on the Mustang some more and fixing up the trailer by repairing the trunk lid and replacing the tires and fixing the suspension. This took way longer than I thought it would because I'm an idiot and don't bother to check if something is standard, sport, or heavy duty before lugging it all the way back to the garage to try out. At some point, I just said fuck it and headed back into the city where I spent some time just scrapping any car I could get my hands on for some extra parts. I really didn't expect this to take an entire day, but if that's what it's going to take to get a kitted trailer with an extra 500 storage space, this was beyond worth it. On 594, I decided to head back out into the city to loot the Gigamart to stock up on food. I hadn't been there since grabbing a few items early on in the playthrough, which would still be relatively unlooted, which would save me a ton of time and energy of having to farm and maintain crops again. Even though I do really enjoy farming in this game, it's a pain in the ass to have to manage water in areas where you don't have a well. This was one of the biggest hauls I've ever done, mainly because I had a trailer and could afford to carry this much stuff at one time. I also grabbed a ton of cooking and baking materials because I wanted to focus more on creating meals in the game, which isn't something I've ever really done before. Don't get me wrong, I've done a lot of cooking like making soup and stews and all of that, but there's some recipes in the game that require flour, cooking oil, and all that fun stuff that I've always just kind of avoided, but I think would probably be pretty cool to check out. By this point, my base is just a hodgepodge of piles of shit just strewn all over the place. So I spent the next few days just cleaning up around the base and redecorating a lot of the room. Spent all of 595 working on the kitchen. 596 was spent on the armory, specifically my gun room. I took all the ammo off the desk and sorted them by most used and least used. After that, I went through the ammo canisters and emptied them out before destroying them in the garbage cans. Not sure why, but I just really don't like how they look. Nothing wrong with the design or anything, I'm just not a fan of them personally. The finished product wasn't much and definitely still needed some more work to make it pretty, but I was happy with the results. Days 597 through 599 were spent tackling the garage. This was going to be a pain in the ass, so I tried my best to at least make it passable for now. First thing I did was pile everything up. It was on the ground, it was going into one massive pile for now that I'd sort out later. After that, I moved both trailers and the spare car out into the parking lot so that I had more space to work with. Now that that was taken care of, I went through the pile for any items that shouldn't be in the garage. Things like sticks, radios, axes, anything like that. Moved all of those to the correct locations. Next up was to organize the pile into smaller piles based on type. Made piles for standard, heavy duty, and sport to keep things organized. Then they'd each get their own crate at some point, but I didn't have the materials to make that happen right now. Moved anything related to Ford or Jeep upgrades in the corner by the crate, and then determined how I wanted the layout to be. So I'd keep the police cruiser in the corner to the left of the stairs, then line the standard or heavy cars up on the right side by the stairs. I'd park the trailers up against the boarded up cafeteria and leave the middle space open for accessibility. 599, I built out another crate and 3 shelving units to keep everything nice and organized. After that wrapped up, I moved the trailers back into the garage. Decided to push the spare Mustang to the far end of the parking lot so that it was out of the way, but still relatively nearby in case I needed it for any reason. Let's be real. There's going to be some reasons. Here we are, day 600. West Point has been full of excitement so far, and I've been having an absolute blast here. I feel like I've done so much in the 100 days that I've been here, and there's still a ton more to do. There's hordes everywhere that I need to clear out. There's base upgrades I still want to make. There's so many POIs that I still haven't even hit yet. There's some skills I still need to level, but I'm sure we'll get around to all of that in the next 100 days. Till next time, thanks for stopping by.